Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hearthstone Legendary Series Season 2, Week 2. I am Cameron Camdoza Reed, joined at the desk by TJ Asimo QD Sanders. How you doing, TJ?
Doing great. Looking forward to some fantastic Hearthstone action today, and looking forward to standing next to this mustache all day.
All day, every day. Now, let's just go ahead and address that big, giant elephant in the room. Who's the weirdo with the mustache sitting in Frodan's chair? Well, you all know my name now. What do? Well, I'm a creative producer here at ESL America, and I also direct a lot of the shows that you've watched that we've produced here. And I play a pretty decent game of Hearthstone, so they asked me to fill in for Frodan. Now, it is Season 2 now, and things have changed up a bit since Season 1. TJ, why don't you go ahead and break those changes down for us?
Yeah, if you guys watched the Legendary Series Season 1, we had a Challenger Cup and a Legendary Series match day every single week. So this week we've sort of spread it out a little bit, made the Challenger Cups matter a little bit more. We have a Challenger Cup followed by the following week, which will be a Legendary Series match day. So instead of a total of 8 weeks, we'll have a total of 4 weeks of Legendary Series. Each week, we will have 6 players, the top 6 players from the previous week's Challenger Cup, combined with 2 players who will be invited, 2 players of exceptional skill and maybe some exceptional popularity as well, joining those 6 players for a total of 8. Now, the winner of every single week will get an automatic invite to the Legendary Series LAN Finals, which will happen on June 5th, 6th, and 7th. And, of course, with the new season of Legendary Series, we have a new match format as well. That's going to be Conquest, which some of you may be familiar with. It is the now Blizzard sort of standardized format for competitive Hearthstone. It's a best of 5. Each player brings 3 unique decks, and in order to win the match, they have to win 1 game with all 3 of their decks. So it adds quite a bit more variety to the deck choices of these players.
Yeah, gone are the days of just bringing Face Hunter and then 3-0ing your opponent in 10 or 15 minutes and never really giving them a chance because you just got amazing draws.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we do want to thank our sponsors, Plantronics and Gigabyte. Go ahead and follow those URLs down below to support the Hearthstone Legendary Series by decking out your own rig at home with a nice headset or a good motherboard. And, of course, we also want to always hear what you have to say. Tweet at us using the hashtag HLS with your predictions, anything that you just thought you may be having on random occurrences in life. Now, as always, we are giving away loads of goodies today.
Including some packs.
Yes, some packs, some classic packs. Go to esl.gg/legendary giveaway. You'll be able to enter some raffles for packs and Plantronics rig headsets.
And there are classic packs, which are the most efficient packs.
Yes.
As Professor Osmokidi will tell you, the most efficient way to get legendaries is to win some classic packs.
That's right. Don't underestimate the classic packs. Now, before we get started with Week 2's action, we did want to take a quick look back at Week 1 and recap Life Coach's amazing run to be our first player at the Season 2 LAN Final.
To be honest, I think this tournament was not that difficult.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the ESL Hearthstone Legendary Series. A very tough matchup for Life Coach. Wow, lethal. Oh my gosh. Nice. Life Coach probably kicking himself in that one.
But there were not that many difficult playing situations. It's not that it suddenly gets more difficult against a certain opponent. It's rather like either the playing situations are more difficult or not.
Looks like Strivecrow is going to tie this series up.
I mean, I try to think as much as possible with a given time, and also, of course, the preparation takes an important role. So I take a look at all the opponents of the tournament and analyze them completely throughout and analyze what classes they used to play. And then I will adjust all my decks and all my tech choices regarding my expectations.
And he's going to reclaim his throne as, I guess, the unofficial #1 player.
Yeah, sometimes you get to spots where you're not comfortable with because you just, like, they are rare, for example, and then you have to think. The mind is everything the human has, so I'm really trying to build and improve my mind every day. If you say, okay, I want to analyze every situation as much as possible until I come to a very clear conclusion, yeah, then you can simply play Hearthstone and get better.
Such an interesting guy, life coach. You know, you ask him a question about his run last week, and he says, well, the mind is everything that the human has. And he gives these really interesting and deep responses to what we thought were actually pretty simple questions.
Yeah, he's definitely a wise fellow. He's one of the older competitive Hearthstone players as well. Recently just made it his full-time job, basically, to play Hearthstone, so not surprised he's making those philosophical quotes already. He's like the father of competitive Hearthstone.
Yes. Now, we do have 8 players this week who are going to be competing to join Life Coach as the next player qualified for the Season 2 LAN Final. TJ, let's go ahead and preview these groups.
Yeah, in Group A here we have Tom, Luffy, and Lemurian, who are the 3 players in Group A who made it through that Challenger Cup. And, of course, they are joined by Kalento, who is one of our invited players for the week. And in Group B, we had Lead Paint, also known as Frank in the box, who, if you watched or kept along with the Challenger Cup from last week, Roger and Silent Storm, who was our Season 1 Legendary Series LAN Final winner. And they're joined by Trump, who's the invite for that group.
Yeah, definitely, I want to say one of the most stacked days that we've had since the inception of the Legendary Series. You've got the Season 1 champion in Silent Storm. You've got someone who most pro Hearthstone players consider probably the best player in the world in Kalento. They'll say over and over again that he's just miles ahead of everybody. Yeah. The mayor of Value Town himself is here, Trump. And then we've got a BlizzCon player in Tom60229. The list just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and all these guys have some sort of like unique fact about themselves that sort of separates them from the other players, at least in the competitive Hearthstone scene. And of course, that first match between Tom and Luffy, you mentioned Tom, he was a BlizzCon player. He made it top 16, I believe, in BlizzCon for 2014.
Yep.
Taiwanese player, plays for, I believe, the Yowie Flash Wolves, and has a lot of Taiwanese practice partners, though, so that are outside of his team. That's just how the Taiwanese players operate. It's a big team effort. And then, of course, Luffy, who it's unofficial because nobody really keeps count, but if you look, he has the most competitive Hearthstone victories in non-invite tournaments. If you look at any bracket from a non-invite tournament, like the weekly tournament, Zotac, ESL, he's always in the top 16, but he's yet to have that breakout performance.
Yeah, this could be his opportunity to make a name for himself and have that big breakout performance. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing how this match is going to play out. Now, it looks like Tom is going to be bringing a Druid, a Mage, and a Shaman to the match. And then we're going to have Luffy playing the Paladin, the Warlock, and the Priest. Given those deck choices, TJ, who do you think, at least on paper, seems to have the advantage?
It's really tough to say, and a lot of it comes down to their deck choices once they start winning and losing. And the blind pick, of course, the first match in Conquest is always blind pick. They know the other 3 decks that their opponent has. They just don't know what order they're going to play them in. So, Paladin versus Mage. Now, Paladin's pretty standard. Most Paladins have the same type of cards. There's not much difference between like a mid-range and a control Paladin, aside from maybe a couple cards like Double Equality or like the Wild Pyromancers or something like that. But Mage has a lot of variety. There's Mech Mage, Tempo Mage, the Grinder Mage that Strivecrow made popular. Freeze Mage is making a comeback with Emperor Thorson now, so it's almost impossible to tell what type of matchup is going to be because we just don't know what type of Mage that Tom is going to be bringing. So the first matchup is going to tell us a lot.
I do want to think it's pretty safe to say, though, that the Mage should be favored almost no matter what variation it's bringing.
That's true.
You know, the Mech Mage just can sort of out-tempo the Paladin. The Freeze Mage can stall things out even if they get a big Quartermaster turn. It's just, oh, no problem. Frost Nova Doomsayer, handled. So it'll be really interesting to see how these games are going to play out. And the other thing I want to know here is who you think is favored in this match, just given their overall history as a player.
This is really tough. It's always tough to give player matchups because we were talking about this a little bit before, but a lot of Hearthstone comes down to like the mentality of players when they go into a tournament. Luffy, he hasn't really had a big breakout win like we talked about, and that could weigh on his mental fortitude. He might be thinking, oh, I kind of need to win this to make a name for myself. He plays for Hearthstone full time, and he can't just keep winning the weekly cups. He has to sort of break through. Tom, on the other hand, since BlizzCon, he's had some success. But really not any huge, big tournament performances. Like some other Taiwanese players like Roger, who's also in the tournament, who just took second at the By-Game House Cup. He hasn't really had those huge performances either. So both these players are coming into this with a lot to gain, but also like a lot to lose in the fact that Tom could tarnish his reputation a little bit. Luffy could just go back to being that weekly Challenger Cup player that only some people even know he exists.
Right.
So it's really hard to tell. I think Tom probably has more big stage competitive experience, some of the bigger tournaments he's played over in Asia, and of course BlizzCon, but it's really hard to say.
All right, so as we jump into the mulligans here, the Paladin Luffy's got to be feeling pretty good already about seeing the shielded mini-bot. Do you keep both of them in this case, though?
I think so. There's not really too many early drops. The one thing, it also depends if you're running a zombie chow, because you might want to throw one away finding it, but you always have to, when you're playing against a mage you don't know, assume that it's mech mage.
Yeah.
Because if you assume that it's anything else, and you get behind early, you lose.
Yeah.
Unless you draw into like the perfectly timed equality consecrate or equality anything really, then it's going to be really hard for you to come back. So this is going to be freeze mage from Tom.
All right, and so as we jump in, it looks like both players just going to pass on the first couple turns, try to establish a little bit of a board here though from the Paladin with the shielded mini-bot.
Yeah, now this matchup, it's pretty slow pace, but a couple big cards here. I'm a little bit surprised. Well, actually, I'm not surprised since he didn't know what the deck was. If he knew this was Freeze Mage, I'm sure he would have held on to that Lotheb.
Absolutely.
But Lay on Hands is actually a fantastic card to have in this matchup because it's something that you really need to save until after the Alexstrasza comes. Because you can play Lay on Hands and then the following turn play Lotheb plus like an anti-Keel bot, and that pretty much wins you the game because usually Freeze Mages just don't have enough damage unless they get a fantastic Archmage Antonidas to push through that much heal. So it's going to be like some key cards that are going to win this. And it's how long is it going to take him to realize that this is Freeze Mage? I'm sure he realized it already.
I think with the ping pass, I think he knows absolutely that it's a Freeze Mage.
Or it's like the Mech Mage that got Dr. Boom and Archmage Antonidas and the Goblin Blast Mages in his opening hand, which is terrible start, but it usually never happens.
Yeah. So now I think we're probably just going to wind up seeing the Acolyte of Pain. Probably guaranteed to get at least 2 draws, at least looking at the board. So that feels pretty good. And Luffy doesn't really have a turn that feels that great right now.
Yeah, I mean, at this point you sort of just have to realize that he's going to get 2 draws pretty much no matter what. Even if he had like an Owl, it's really hard to use an Owl early on an Acolyte of Pain because Freeze Mage usually has so many ways to draw into cards anyway.
Right.
That Owl will probably be better spent using on a Doomsayer to protect your board later on in the game. You can't really afford to deny 1 drop from him and risk putting yourselves in rougher situations later on. So he doesn't even hold off on the hero power, which sometimes you might think of to maybe try and deny a third draw. But this time he just goes for it because what else is he going to do?
Right. Yeah, next turn he can always just bounce one of those mini-bots off it to deny 3 draws out of it. And we just see the Ice Barrier going up.
Yeah, Emperor Thorson could be pretty big. It's one of the reasons why Freeze Mage is making a comeback because there are so many cards that have a huge impact, even if they cost just 1 mana less. It lets you be able to fit in so much more. Archmage Antonidas, if that costs 1 less, all of a sudden you can fit in on turn 10 Archmage Antonidas plus a Fireball. Or if you had a Fireball and you have the coin still on turn 10, Archmage Antonidas, coin, Fireball, Frostbolt, Ice Lances cost 0 all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah.
Like you could put out Burst and all of a sudden refill your hand. There's just so many possibilities. Alexstrasza a turn earlier, bigger burst potential after the Alexstrasza comes down. The card just fits so well into Freeze Mage that I'm not surprised it's starting to make a comeback.
So a pretty clear Belcher turn there for Luffy. Now, do you think we're going to see him go ahead and coin Thorsan right now? Looks like it.
Yeah, he has enough high-impact cards in his hand to be able to make use of it. There would be an argument to saving the coin for basically turning the coin into a Fireball because he already has Archmage in his hand. But Alexstrasza costing 1 less, knowing that it's tough because also at the same time you want to try and wait for, hey, maybe I can get more value out of this by clearing his board first and then playing it after I board clear, making it harder for him to deal with. Because the things that Paladin usually uses to deal with that stuff, Aldor Peacekeeper doesn't really do anything. You can't just let it sit there with 1 attack.
Right.
So,
yeah, and that's always, I've noticed, although Thorsan's only been out for about a week and a half now, I've noticed that if you can get rid of him immediately, it's scary, but it's not so terrible. If you let him sit there for 1 turn and he winds up taking his ability twice, that's when you're in the biggest trouble.
Yeah, for sure. He also adds a little bit of an extra dynamic to some of these matches because you have to sort of look at your opponent's hand and sort of like timestamp it and say, okay, those are the cards he had when he played Emperor Thorsan, and try and look for the burst cards coming out, like the Fireball and the Frost Bolts, to try and be able to calculate how much damage he'll be able to do with reduced cards. So he's going to be counting how many non-reduced Fireballs, non-reduced Frost Bolts he's going to use for the rest of the game to sort of, in a janky way, calculate how much possible damage he can do. Because a lot of times it does come down to a couple points of damage in this matchup because Paladins have those sneaky little points of heal with Lay on Hands and True Silver.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the worst when you've got the Paladin down to, say, 2 health, and you've got 3 damage in hand, but that's all you've got. And then he just pops up a True Silver, hits you in the face, and the game is just out of control now. Now you lose because of that 1 hit point, or those 2 hit points, I mean. So the Paladin, I don't just love any of his plays here. What is he going to try to do, though? Just sort of race and try to pop that block as quickly as possible?
He has to at this point. Usually... it's really hard to tell because people haven't really had a chance to develop patterns with Emperor Thorsan yet. Like a coin Emperor Thorsan doesn't necessarily mean a reduced cost Alexstrasza. But a turning Alexstrasza is really scary because then if you hadn't popped the block yet, your opponent has 2 or 3 full turns to be able to either refill his hand with burst to get that last 15 points of damage or play a second ice block. It just gives him so much room to maneuver getting the Alexstrasza out earlier. So you have to be a little bit scared, and so he wants to put a lot of power on the board.
Oh, wow. So he's going to put the Doomsayer down.
Oh, that's actually a...
This could wind up... Oh! I think that worked out perfectly for him, actually, because it's going to be the beginning of the Paladin's turn.
That could have been really disastrous, though. Because he didn't trade off. You can tell he's really not happy because, oh yeah, that's a fancy play. Yeah, the old Sylvanas, Fireball the Sylvanas to steal your Doomsayer trick. Clears the whole board. But he didn't trade off his Mad Scientist first. So there was a chance that the Mad Scientist could have gotten stolen. Yeah. In which case he would have been able to clear the Doomsayer off the next board, taken away the Mad Scientist. That could have backfired a lot, but Tom escapes. A
bit of a misplay there, but he is still in it, and it worked out exactly as he was hoping it would.
Ooh, the Rag.
The Ragnaros. Do you take the 50-50 and then just go face on it clearing Alexstrasza?
I think you have to Lay on Hands here.
Yeah.
The only problem with Lay on Hands here is that you leave the Alexstrasza up for another turn. Yeah. Because there's nothing that he can draw into. He will only have 1 mana left. That wouldn't be able to use the equality. He does have 2 taunts in the way, so the Alexstrasza most likely won't hit face unless he's got some a reduced cost Blizzard or even just like Blizzard Fireball, which he'd be happy with because it wouldn't be going towards face.
Well, he's already seen 1 Fireball too, so he knows statistically it's less likely that he's got the other one.
Yeah, but he definitely has to Lay on Hands here because there's a real chance that he could just be dead the next turn if he doesn't.
All right, so he picks up some pretty high impact cards. Dr. Boom especially.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because Dr. Boom, even if you freeze it, eventually when you kill the boom bots, they're going to do damage to you regardless.
Yep.
And Rag, you can't freeze. Well, you can freeze him, but
it's useless.
Does not going to do anything.
Alrighty, so I feel like this is tough. It's hard to say what I want to see happen here. Maybe
just fill his hand with fireballs.
I was going to say I would probably lay down Archmage and then Frost Nova and maybe even Ice Lance.
Yeah. Usually, well, a lot of times you want to save the Ice Lance for damage, but in this case, since you're refilling your hands with Fireball, you're basically replacing the 0 mana 4 damage with 4 mana 6 damage.
Right.
So
and you haven't seen a True Silver yet. A True Silver wouldn't be the scariest thing in the world at this point in the game, but freezing a weapon class's face always feels really good.
Yeah, yeah. Because you're basically denying him doing anything next turn. Because a lot of times Paladins don't have immediate damage aside from like Consecrate or True Silver. The only thing he'd be worried about here would be a Quality Consecrate, because that would hurt him quite a bit since he's only getting 1 Fireball from this, and he's going to start running out of damage. But he's okay with taking that risk because the other plays are really subpar.
Yeah. And we do see that he doesn't have the equality yet. So I'm really not sure how the Paladin's going to try to deal with this. He has some options, though. He could throw down Dr. Boom, giving obvious value there. Oh, or he could just YOLO rag it and hope it clears one of those targets instead of hitting the face.
Yeah. Rag, great card against Freeze Mage, but not usually when you're behind. Leaving Archmage Antonidas potentially on the board for one extra turn after Alexstrasza.
Oh.
This most likely will be the nail in the coffin.
Oh,
because
yeah.
he's even got an extra turn to play that second ice block if he had drawn into it.
Yeah.
But he's just going to go ham here.
And he picks up the Pyroblast, the likely finisher on the next turn as well.
Yeah. It's not quite lethal damage, but it is very close.
Yeah.
Actually, he has to think about this.
Frostbolt Ice Lance?
He has to think about because he doesn't want the block pop this turn, because there is a chance that he could heal out of range. So the maximum amount of damage he could do would be this turn, 6 plus the 3 from the fireball, 13.
He can do 13 more, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he'll have fireballs for next turn. He's got the block up.
Yeah, he's worried. The things he's worried about are anti-heal bot, which would actually he'd have 4 health remaining plus the 8. He still would be dead.
Yeah,
I guess
he'd
he's
still
worried
be
about
dead to double fireball.
He might be worried about Lotheb, but I think he can just go for it here. And I think he did the quick calculations and realized, aside from Lotheb, which will buy me an extra turn anyway, even if he pox a block the next turn, I'll still have an extra one. So he's okay with this.
So are there any outs for the Paladin?
He can't heal from True Silver. Anti-heal bot wouldn't save him. He needs anti-heal bot and Lotheb.
Lotheb, which he cannot pick up.
Yeah. So
probably a likely concede here.
Yeah. And usually you try and stay in the game a little bit longer to maybe see some cards, but this is standard Freeze Mage plus Emperor Thorson. You know that those fireballs are in his hand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this seems like a concede. Can't benefit from the heal at all. Even if you could, wouldn't matter.
Right. So then, at this point, he's taking his time, probably just thinking about what's going to happen in the next game. What class should I bring? What class do I expect him to choose as he concedes out?
Yeah.
All right, well, a pretty dominant performance from the old Freeze Mage using Emperor Thorsan there.
Yeah, and that matchup is actually a lot closer. I think the Freeze Mage has a little bit of an edge, but there are some big cards in that matchup that allow the Paladin to make comebacks, like the heals, the Lay on Hands, the True Silver Champions. But having that coined out Emperor Thorsan to make an earlier Alexstrasza, a cheaper Archmage Antonidas, cheaper burn spells, it would just wasn't much that Luffy could do in that type of situation. But, I mean, he doesn't have to worry about that Freeze Mage anymore, at least for this series.
Yeah, that's true. So Emperor Thorsan is a card obviously I think we'd be remiss not to spend a little bit of time talking about.
For sure.
I think he's definitely the new controversial card, if you want to call him the new Dr. Boom in that regard. But what's interesting about it is I've talked to several people about it, Life Coach and GCT Turth among them, and I seem to be getting these differing opinions. For instance, Life Coach says, oh, it's the easiest card to play in the world, and it's immediate, insane impact. You just play it as soon as you have the mana to, and it increases your win rate.
Yeah.
But then there's other players, like Luffy was saying, that he was just chewing kids up who were trying to use Thorsan.
Yeah, Luffy said that he basically made it to today because people were overvaluing Emperor Thorsan in a lot of decks. And he said he preyed on Druids especially, who cut things like Sylvanas or like Second Force in Nature to put in Emperor Thorsan because it just was too slow.
Yep.
But, I mean, it's really early to tell. I mean, it's sort of the story we're talking about a little bit earlier before the broadcast. The story of, like, Trogzor or even Bomb Lobber, who was sort of a controversial card at the beginning. Some players were saying, oh, it's going to be an auto-include in a lot of decks because the immediate impact it has on a board.
Right.
It's really only seen in Arena and maybe, like, Control Warrior. So there's a lot of debate about cards, and it doesn't really get fleshed out until... Now we've seen it for a couple weeks, so this is going to be a good test today. But I think it works fantastically in combo decks, like the Freeze Mage, Oil Rogue, Combo Druid. But we'll have to see for others.
All right. So Luffy going to stick to the Paladin. Yeah. How do you feel about that matchup versus a Shaman?
It's
kind of a 50-50, isn't it?
Sort of. I'd say so. I'd actually give a little bit of edge to the Paladin. Just because Shamans, I mean, one of the reasons why Shamans aren't considered to be as strong as other classes right now is the high amount of variance that they have. you can't make mistakes as a Shaman.
Right.
But you have a lot of leeway with other classes to make a couple mistakes and still be able to come back. The consistency of their draws is really important. They have to have a really good curve in order to take victories. And the overload mechanic can sometimes put them way far behind early on if they're forced to use an early Storm or early Feral Spirits.
Well, it can also give them insane tempo early, though.
It
because
can.
The whole concept is you're getting more mana value than what you're spending right now.
It can, but against a lot of decks right now, you can't afford to like skip a turn effectively.
Right, right.
And so it's just not as consistent as other decks, and that's why it probably isn't used as much. But the Taiwanese players love Shaman.
Yeah.
If you look back to Pin Ping Ho from his run last season in the Legendary Series, Roger and Tom, both the players today, always bring Shaman to just about everything. The Taiwanese players at the Legendary Series Finals last season both brought Mech Shaman. So they're attached to the class, and I was talking to them. They think that if you're good at it, it's middle of the road, which is saying something. If the region who loves Shaman the best says if you're a great Shaman, the class is middle of the road as far as like the meta goes, then maybe not the strongest. But this class all depends on, I think, the early game or whether or not the Paladin can deal with being behind, which sometimes they can't.
Well, I love this hand that Luffy's got right now. He can potentially coin out a piloted Shredder next turn, follow it up with another piloted Shredder. He can get just early muster for battle value out there, which is always just a nightmare to deal with if you don't have your AoE. So much value for muster. And I'm looking at Tom's hand, and I don't know, Feral Spirit doesn't feel very good right now, although you could always follow it up with Flame Tongue.
He's thinking about whether or not he wants to Earthshock here, because Earthshock would straight up kill that mini-bot. But he wouldn't have a good follow-up play. He could Totem, and then next turn he'd have like Feral Spirit Rockbiter as his only play.
Yeah.
Which seems weak. He's thinking, what could I expect from turn 3 from this guy?
Right.
Maybe Acolyte of Pain, probably thinking about that coin Paladin Shredder, and what kind of position would I be in? So he realizes that maybe I should shock for that Acolyte or save the Earthshock later on for the Tyrion. Yeah. And hold on to it for now, because Feral Spirit's still a strong play against Shielded Minibot.
All right. So he's just going to muster for battle here and take down one of those puppies.
A literal puppy.
Love those puppies.
Yeah. A lot of players have been cutting Feral Spirits from Shaman decks. Cutting one, sometimes even cutting both, just because a lot of the popular cards right now trade actually pretty well into Feral Spirits and make the mana cost not so great. Like 3 mana Feral Spirits plus the Overload for the following turn usually doesn't even trade into like a Piloted Shredder. Right. The first entity of a Piloted Shredder. Yeah. Let alone what comes out of it.
Millhouse Mana Storm.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time.
Yeah. So it can be a really inconsistent card, but it does buy you time. And if you have cards like Flame Tongue Totem to buff them up, or if you can play it on an open board and really be able to dictate the pace of the board, then it can be good.
So I think he's actually more worried about the Coin Quartermaster there, choosing to take out the Silverhand Recruit instead of the Minibot.
Yeah. Well, and it also brings his Feral Spirit back up to full health, so it's like basically there was never a Silverhand Recruit there at all. But yeah, the Coin Quartermaster is that's one of the reasons why Paladins are so strong. Paladins could cut Quartermaster. People would still play around Quartermaster.
They'd still play around it, yeah. It's that big of a threat.
Yeah, so it forces people. It's like it makes your hero power stronger, just the existence of Quartermaster.
So yeah, so there's where he's going to save the Earthshock for. And I feel a lot better about that.
Yeah.
Than using it on a shielded Minibot.
Yeah, see, this is where I think that Shamans fall short is their cards are terribly inefficient if you don't have the right answers at the right time.
Yeah, like even in that case, he's able to deny the Piloted Shredder a second iteration, but it still trades 2 for 1. Yeah. He soaks up a Rockbiter and an Earthshock.
Exactly. Now, the one thing that they can do is that their boards, once they build them, are really hard to deal with. Because Flame Tongue Totem, even like Mana Tide Totem, that 3 health mark, are super awkward.
See, this is where I always feel terrible playing against Shaman. When I have to use something like an Equality or a Consecration, and mostly all I'm dealing with are like totems.
Yeah, yeah. But that's how you win against Shaman, because if they lose their board and you see them trading 2 for 1 because they're trying to get that preserve their board. You know that you can be liberal with your removal because you know that there's not going to be that much on the other end. Next turn, they're probably going to totem up and maybe play a really small creature. And so if you can clear the board and hold on to it, Shamans don't really have a comeback mechanic.
Yeah, other than maybe just a huge lightning storm.
Yeah, like a Azure Drake, roll a spell power totem into a lightning storm. But that's when the stars align, and I don't know, Shamans don't really like stars, I guess.
Who doesn't like stars?
I hate stars.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is going to be what I would probably Sylvanas here if I was in this situation. Now, it does depend on if he's running 1 or 2 Quartermasters.
Yeah.
I think if he's running 2 Quartermasters, I would Shredder and try to keep establishing more and more of a presence every turn with my Silver Hand recruits.
Yeah. Check first, I think, is what he's going to do. See what comes out of that puppy. But I might be inclined to pile the Shredder and Hero Power here. Just because if there's a Hex in that hand, you want to try and find it before you start playing your big threats.
Oh, that's a great point.
And if you're behind on the board as a Shaman, sometimes you're forced to Hex something like a Piloted Shredder that's just going to eat up your totems or eat up your small creatures turn after turn after turn. So he's going to – this is basically a check for help. Whoa!
There's a top deck.
Off the top.
Wow. Yeah, and I guess it's always interesting, too, that, you know, I take it for granted that Luffy doesn't know that Tom doesn't have a Hex in his hand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's really easy for us sitting here to be like, oh, Sylvanas seems like a really strong player right now.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at, you know, just a couple Flame Tongues, Alakir, and a Rock Biter.
It's the confirmation bias, the caster confirmation bias there. But he does have Big Game Hunter, but Big Game Hunter, it doesn't really cleanly deal with Dr. Boom.
No, it doesn't. There's really no single card that does cleanly deal with it.
If only Big Game Hunter had a whirlwind effect attached to it. The ultimate Dr. Boom counter.
The ultimate Dr. Boom counter. Finally, everybody at home says.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alakir is really his only option here.
Yeah.
It's a weak Alakir because he's starting to run out of threats. I mean, he probably runs Neptulon. I was actually talking to Tom yesterday. He said his favorite card is Neptulon. It fits because his favorite class is Shaman, as most Taiwanese players will tell you. And but that's a long shot because he has only been through maybe half his deck, probably not even. And so if he uses his big Alakir threat here to just clear the board.
Just thinking the same thing, that Alakir's his primary win condition at this point, and he's already got the Rock Biter in hand as well.
Yeah.
Is it something that you really do want to use this early, and then what is your win condition after that? Try to get the board back?
Yeah, you have to make the Paladin like run out of cards and then draw into Neptulon. He realizes that, he says, oh, that's a great win condition, but is there ever a chance that I'm going to be able to get out Flame Tongue Totem or 2 Flame Tongue Totems, have them live for a turn, enough for me to Alakir Rock Biter?
Yeah.
And he decides not to trade, and he is going to be...
he gets punished for it.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, is right. Is right.
Well, this one could be all over but the crying. But we will see if he's able to pick up some pretty insane draws. It'd have to be probably a runner Lightning Storm.
Like Azure Drake.
Azure Drake into Lightning Storm.
Lightning Storm. Azure Drake survives. Next turn, Azure Drake into the second Lightning Storm. Yeah, it's looking really grim. And I mean, this is what happens when you draw into a lot of your answers early on. You sort of need to be proactive as a Shaman and then draw into your answers in the mid game and then draw into your threats in the late game. That's why I said it's hard to be successful as a Shaman. The variance is so high because your curve matters so much. If he had drawn the Haunted Creeper and the Harvest Golem earlier on instead of like both Rock Biters, he would have been in a completely different position in this game.
So now if you're Luffy, do you just start getting aggressive and slamming huge cards down, or do you maybe lay on hands and force your opponent into these bad trades and just play the long con, slowly put the icing on the cake?
Yeah, I think the safe way would be to just play the long con because you know that a Shaman's only going to do something with the board. He's not going to be able to come back in the game without a board. They don't have huge card draw mechanics like Lay on Hands. They might get one draw out of a Mana Tide Totem, one draw out of an Azure Drake. So you just got to make your cards go farther than his cards, and eventually you'll win.
Oh, so we're going to see an Owl here?
What else in that deck would he even need to Owl?
Yeah, Alakir's already gone. I'm trying to think of what there is. A Sludge Belcher, I guess, if there's even a Sludge Belcher in there?
It would be fantastic if you could silence an Neptulon and have it remove all the Mirlocks from your opponent's hand.
Now, there is one thing that could possibly happen, is the most insane Neptulon roll of all time. You get a couple War Leaders, so all of a sudden you've got like 4, 6, 7s.
Yeah. Oh, man. Neptulon is... That's what a lot of players say Neptulon's their favorite card, just because... You're pulling cards from nowhere.
Yeah.
You basically have 34 cards in your deck. And those cards can be pretty potent.
Absolutely.
Even a Bluegill Warrior. That's a Bluegill Warrior that you didn't have in your deck before.
The Bluegill Warrior. Always underestimated. That's that one card that I always see it hit the board if someone actually is playing it.
Yeah.
And I think like, oh, lol, he's playing a Bluegill Warrior. How adorable. I've got this. But then I realized, wait a second, that just traded up with something I really didn't want to. Oh my gosh, am I going to lose this? What?
Or he surrounds it, 2 Flame Totems on either side, and then like a Wind Speaker. And it like domes your face for 12. Yeah, the dream. Rarely happens like that. Normally, when I played Shaman, I played Neptulon, and then like I got BGH and I died the next turn. That's my experience with Neptulon.
So a little bit of BM, a little bit of well-met action from Luffy as he realizes he's got this one completely on lock.
Oh, the concede.
All right, and he evens up the series.
Yeah, no. That was a pretty straightforward. A lot of Shaman games just go like that. It's just the Shaman just slowly losing. And or they win early or they slowly lose. It seems like that. I was hyped last week when he was talking about the Shaman matchups. He said, oh, you get Haunted Creeper in your opening hand? Oh, Shaman wins. And you don't get a Haunted Creeper or Harvest Golem or any of those early bodies in your opening hand. It's just so hard to make efficient use of your cards and be able to build up enough of a board for you to get in the lead at some point. So, rough stuff.
So if you're Tom, you know that up next you're going to be either playing a Warlock or a Priest, depending on what Luffy chooses to bring. Do you stick with the Shaman and just try to get that win out with it so you don't have to play it again?
Yeah. I think the best strategy for Conquest is to play your weaker decks first, is to get your weaker decks out of the way first, because if you can pick up the wins with your weaker classes earlier on, then it makes it easier for you to match up later on when you can only play one deck. So like if you save your weakest class for last, Shaman, who has the most bad matchups, if you don't find a win and your opponent has the option to choose different decks to play against it, it could be really hard for you to pick up that last win. And he actually decides to switch.
Yeah, going with the Druid.
Yeah. Which, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this.
No? Why not?
Just because, I said it, you want to get the win with your weaker class first. Druid can almost win against anything. So
that's true. I think that's probably what he's trying to do, though, is he wants to have 2 potential chances with the Shaman.
Yeah.
At the end, like he thinks with this Druid, I've got the best chance to snag a win and then have 2 chances with my Shaman, as opposed to potentially just losing 2 in a row with his Shaman and losing the entire series. Yeah,
he might have been guessing that there was going to be a Priest, and he picked the Druid thinking that was going to be a Priest because Shaman just is terrible against Priest. And Fast Druid is actually exceptional against Priest, and there's cards that you can put in that make it even better. Like Spectral Knights. The days when Priest was more popular and Druids would just auto-win whenever if they played a Spectral Knight on the coin out turn 4 or turn 5. So I think he just tried to go with a little bit of a mind game, but just misread what Luffy was going to play for the following match.
Now, it's the interesting little fact that Firebat was sharing about this new Conquest format. He said that 80% of players, when they lose a match, will just stick with that same deck.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to some players earlier, and they were watching and didn't even realize that you had the ability to switch decks. Because so many people weren't. At the beginning of the Conquest format, they thought, well, why would I switch?
Right.
And so a lot of players watching wouldn't switch because they didn't know that you could switch. If you don't read the official rules and someone just tells you, oh, you got to win a deck, you got to win one with each of your 3 decks. Someone will be like, oh, well, it's like last year's Cindy but backwards, so I have to stay on this deck.
Now we do see the wild growth coined on turn 1. That always feels so good. And look at his curve. He's got the Shade and Axramis next turn. He's got the Piloted Shredder the turn after that. If he's up against a hand lock, which it appears he is, he's already got BGH in hand.
Yeah.
He's got to be feeling great right now.
The one thing that he's afraid of is a big Hellfire if he goes all in on the Shades. But he curves out so nicely here. He can play the Piloted Shredder the following turn. And by the time turn 4 rolls around, he won't be as vulnerable to Hellfire because now he knows that Hellfire would just do as much damage to his opponent now that he has an Earthring Farseer on the board than it would to him.
Yep.
Ooh, Faceless.
Faceless Manipulator, all right.
So this is, I would say, judging by the Faceless, that this is most likely some sort of combo
Combo
deck.
lock, yeah.
And I was talking with some players yesterday, and they were saying that they think Combo Lock's going to make a comeback. Emperor Thorsan, we talked about it earlier, great in combo decks.
Yep.
Warlock, a class, Handlock especially, it's called Handlock. They usually have a lot of cards in their hand. So Thorsan gains huge value, played almost at any time in Handlock. And if you're able to reduce the cost of whatever combo piece he's playing, either Arcane Golem or Leroy Jenkins, that's a lot of damage, usually 20 plus. The Arcane Golem, double power overwhelming faces is 24 damage.
I mean, it basically makes Leroy pre-nerf.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just great.
It's like Emperor Thorsan, new effect. Go back in time, 4 patches.
So, no respect for the Mortal Coil there on his Shade.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's just like...
Don't feel that bad about it.
If you have it, you have it. You know? I ain't even mad. It does tell him one thing, though, that he doesn't have the Keeper, which could be a big tell for... Because that's almost an automatic play. It might have been a little awkward there just because it was he only had 5 mana, so he couldn't Keeper hero power. But most likely he would have Keepered it anyway, just so it wouldn't be able to trade and still live.
Right.
Or trade Shadow Flame, something like that, which would be really devastating for his board at this point.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the Shadow Flame at this point. Hellfire, I mean, I guess it's probably your best bet.
Yeah.
Clears the board except for the nice little youthful Brewmaster there, but you do have to also trade out your Drake.
Yeah. That's a pretty above average Paladin Shredder.
Yeah, I'd say so.
5 power is
I mean, I get Captain's Parrot every time I play it.
Yeah.
Hands down, no matter what.
Yeah, at first I thought it was like a limited pool of cards that you could get. It was like either Captain's Parrots or Millhouse.
Right.
Like, those were the only 2 I ever saw. The day that I got like a Bluegill Warrior, I was like, what?
Was that the same day that you kind of automatically ended turn before realizing that it was a 2-1 with charge?
Yeah,
and you miss out on 2 damage?
Oh, sweet, a Bluegill Warrior. End turn.
Whoops.
Oh, no.
Mistakes were made.
Yeah.
So the question here is Dr. Boom or Ancient of Lore for me. I mean, it's pretty traditional to put down Dr. Boom right on turn 7. And he does already have Savage Roar, though, which is what's making me think maybe I'd just start fishing for the combo.
Yeah. And it can feel good to do that. But if you know that you have the draw, you know that you're going to get the draw, playing the threats first is usually better. Because usually your opponent's going to be playing reactively the next turn.
Right.
Playing the Ancient of Lore is sort of taking a passive stance, which you can't really do in Handlock as Druid because you need to always be threatening combo damage. You need to always be threatening something. And so taking that passive turn, you want to force your opponent to be reactive this turn so that we have a little bit more leeway to play and draw cards the following turn. Rag is...
Ragnaros, making a comeback.
It's such an awkward card to play against the Handlock, though, because you don't want to hit face a couple turns. Just give him a couple free Moltons.
Give him a couple free Moltons, yep.
Control damage is the way you win games as a Druid against the Handlock. Because you want to always have a board and be threatening lethal with combo, but never get close enough to make it so that he can play Molten Giants and Shadow Flame or do fancy Handlock things. See,
now I may be mistaken in this philosophy, but I've basically stopped playing around Molten Giants. The way I look at it is, if you've got them both in your hand, you probably win anyway. So let's just find out.
Yeah. I think a lot of players play like that too. You're not alone.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. I always play safe. I'm a boring Hearthstone player.
I never play safe, man. I'm always just, what's the most YOLO thing I can do right now?
Yeah.
YOLO move that I made, Emperor Thorsan, coin, double innervate, Thorsan. Boom.
Whoa!
I just wanted to. I saw it and I was like, it's not a good play, but I'm going to do it.
I have no cards left.
And I won the game, too.
Emperor Thorsan's not even reducing anything.
It was awesome. It was completely awesome.
But then it's impossible for them to deal with,
Yeah, it
so
was
anything
a
you draw.
5-5 that early in the game. What are you going to do?
Yeah, true. Very true.
Yeah, I was against a mage. And I basically looked at the situation. I was like, realistically, what's he going to do? Frostbolt it to prevent 5 to the face?
Yeah.
That doesn't feel that great. He's probably going to wait until turn 4 and use a fireball.
Yeah.
And by that time, I'll have a couple cards that got some reduced...
Exactly. Then I don't have to worry about a fireball later.
So as we see another Ancient of Lore coming down, and he's going to just take some pretty easy trade here. He still, though, doesn't have that combo.
Yeah. And it's... I think with these cards, he's probably... he could be running double combo, but he most likely is just running one Force Nature and double Savage Roar. Especially if you put in Emperor Thorsan. I've seen a lot of Druids cut either like a Force of Nature or Sylvanas or the second Zombie Chow for the Thorsan.
Yeah, Sylvanas was what I wound up cutting. But after a conversation with you earlier, I'm thinking about popping her back in there.
Yeah. I don't think... aggro is too popular right now. I think you can get away with cutting the Zombie Chow. I think Sylvanas is just too impactful for the game for you to be able to drop it. Ooh, Harrison Jones. Could be exciting later on if there's a Draxus.
Always a fun tech choice. And a pretty clean play here. He's just setting up a big board. Could wind up with a really nasty combo in a couple turns if he winds up picking that up.
And this is, I think, the perfect spot for a Druid to be in. He's got board control. His board is really tough to remove. His opponent's at 21 health, which is like the sweet spot.
Right.
Because if you have like if you have an Ancient of Lore on the board, 21 is like is lethal with just an Ancient of Lore with the combo.
Yep.
So he's definitely okay with this. And I mean, this is lethal still with combo. So if he draws into the piece, even just 2 Keeper of the Groves on the board, he's got the win. And I don't think he's even going to play the Rag.
So what does the Warlock have to do to get back into this? I mean, he's got the Sludge Belcher that could slow things down briefly. Both Keepers are already gone, so he's not going to get silenced. But what are his outs?
Next turn, draw into Arcane Golem and the second Power Overwhelming.
Yeah, on one turn, on a single turn.
Well, he can with his hero power. Well, no, well, you wouldn't be able to play him.
Oh, there's the respect for the Mountain Giant. Or the Molten Giant.
Yeah. And at this point, I mean, he's pretty much, by not playing Rag and by focusing on clearing board, he's basically shown that he's playing around Molten Giants.
Right.
If you're going to play around Molten Giants for half the game, you might as well do it the whole game. Because you're just increasing the likelihood that he's going to draw into them.
Yeah, he's going to have a couple really strong top decks here in order to get back into this.
Yeah. Well, this is potentially lethal. It'd be a 50-50. Because he could...
So you clear the Sludge Belcher.
Oh, no, I think it is lethal. No, it is lethal.
Yeah, with Swipe.
Yeah. I was thinking of with the Ragnaros, but I think this is a cleaner way. I didn't do the math, but I'm sure he did.
Caster math. We're the best.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Always spotting lethal.
No.
Right on time.
Yeah, okay. We're good. He got it.
We got it.
We got it. I spotted lethal in a different way, so. But we'll just say that I have a creative mind.
Yeah, there you go.
That's why casters miss lethal, because they just have, their minds are just too creative. We'll go with that.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
Yeah. Well, he's going to take a second game up.
Yep. And so now this is the situation that I was talking about earlier, where now he's got 2 chances with his Shaman. Feels pretty good for a class that could have potentially just lost every single game he played, to have more chances to win with it.
Yeah, so it was a pretty good read by him. I mean, if Luffy had decided to go with Priest, it would have been a good choice. And Warlock, I mean, either one of those decks could have done well with Warlock. So now he's going to have fun with that Shaman. Against Warlock, it's okay. He's got a lot of answers to big threats. He's got Urshock for Twilight Drakes. He's got the Hexes for the Giants. There's a lot of ways for Shamans to deal with it and then do burst damage.
So I think he makes the expected choice in going with the Priest here.
Of course.
To match up against the Shaman, the deck he knows he's up against. And hoping to force a Game 5 in this first match of Week 2.
This is one of the tougher matchups in Hearthstone right now. It's one of the most lopsided. There's not many matches that you can give more than like a 60-40.
Right.
But I'd say this is 70-30, maybe even 80-20 in favor of the Priest. The only other matchups that have worse percentages than that is like Freeze Mage against Control Warrior.
Yeah.
Which it's like 99-1 in favor of the Control Warrior. You can literally just sit there and armor up every turn. Don't even have to play cards. You can just burn cards.
No problem.
As long as you tab back into Hearthstone and press armor up every turn, he doesn't have enough time to just draw into everything.
Right.
So you're not even playing against the Freeze Mage. The Freeze Mage is playing against himself in that situation.
Yeah, now in this situation, the Priest just has amazing answers to just about everything that Shaman runs. You have Shadow Madness for a lot of their smaller minions that tend to have 2 attack or so. You've got Alkanized Circle. You've got Holy Nova. As we can see, he's running a Light Bomb.
Yeah, it's kind of gross sometimes. The Alkanized Circle is usually just the nail in the coffin for Shamans. If a Shaman builds up a board and then loses that board, if they use a lot of resources to build up and then lose it, it's pretty much game over.
Right.
Because they don't have enough cards, enough value out of each one of their cards, enough individual efficiency to deal with what the Priest is going to put out after they remove, plus build up another board that's big enough. And the choices for Priest are usually pretty easy because Shadow or Death, the only real target is Fire Elemental. And other than that, it's like if they build a big board, just clear it with anything. Holy Nova, Pyromancers, Alkanized Circle.
Wow, nice timing to pick up the Earthshock.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that play by Luffy? Because versus a Shaman, I'll almost never throw down the Cleric until I know it's going to get me some value.
Yeah, I think he's pretty happy with Earthshock being thrown out there, though. I would only throw out the Cleric if I have a powered shield with it. Because otherwise it just will most likely get Rockbitered.
Right.
And the best case scenario for you is that he doesn't have anything. He totems up, gets a Searing Totem, and then you get a free card the next turn. This is really his only play. I mean, it's putting a powered shield on a 1/2 Silence Cleric is pretty weak. But he wasn't happy with his hand, I guess, and decides to just draw into the card now.
Yeah. So on this turn, do we see the Blade Master? Because he doesn't have an opportunity to heal it. Although it does soak up 2 hits from both of the puppies. So you want your Blade Master to live longer than that. But then again, getting both of the puppies with a single card always feels really good as well.
Yeah, I would Shadow with Pain, because next turn is almost certainly going to be an injured Blade Master, Light of the Naru. You know he's not going to really build up a board the following turn.
Yeah.
So next turn, well, ideally, you'd have your Cleric still alive, injured Blade Master, plus the Light Warden from the Light of the Naru.
Right.
Because injured Blade Master, just a 4/3 by itself, is really inefficient because he could have just Flame Tongued this turn and cleared with just one of his wolves, which is terrible.
Of course.
Injured Blade Master is almost your most important card as a priest.
Yeah, it just has the power to trade so efficiently, and coupled with your hero power and Circle of Healing, Light of the Naru. Ooh, Death Lord.
Huh.
That's an edgy tech choice.
Huh. I like it. This could be the... Oh, man. I guess the Asian version of the Priest, which is a lot of players over there and on the ladder run the Death Lord with the Velen's Chosen, which is almost impossible to deal with. It's like a 4/12. which is huge. And a 4-12 taunt that you can put out on like turn 4. It's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
But it's also pretty good because later in the game, in control matchups, a lot of times priest games go to fatigue. And so if you play a Death Lord late in the game, when your opponent doesn't have any like creatures left, and it doesn't have any negative drawbacks, like it's not going to put a creature on the board, a 2/8 that's going to block a bunch of damage is fantastic value, and it's going to be able to keep you alive for more turns. So it's an interesting tech choice. I'm not sure how confident he is in playing it in the Shaman matchup, because I don't know if he wants to have to do with like an Alakir on the board or something like that, because Shaman's very like spell heavy, but we'll have to see.
Well, he could wind up throwing it down this turn after he's going to ping and then probably trade in his Akanai into the Azure Drake.
You can actually...
Or Light of the Naru.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's much cleaner.
Yeah, and he gets a Light Warden out of it too.
Beautiful.
It was always the interaction between Light of the Naru and Akanai Soul Priest with like summoning the Light Warden always confused me.
Yeah, is it still injured if it's dead?
No. Maybe since the card text is backwards already, like Akanai Soul Priest is like, oh, it does damage instead. Well, maybe instead of if it's still injured, it means like if it's just dead, because the card text is backwards as it is. But well,
Holy Fire?
Yeah.
I never feel that. Yeah, I mean, I'll use Holy Fire even if I don't get the heal out of it, if it removes something that important as, you know, the Flame Elemental.
I'm sure he wanted a death in that situation, Shadow or Death in that situation, just because there's not really too many other targets that he's going to be able to Shadow or Death. But this is...
Other than Dr. Boom, who just came off the top.
Oh!
And he chose not to play it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and he's got Shadow Word Death now, which he may wind up using
Shadow
on
Death.
This elemental.
Shadow Death Akanai seems like a pretty decent play here. Well, he's actually going to go with the Death Lord.
Wow. Surprising.
Yeah.
So what do you think his reasoning is going with the Death Lord instead of the Soul Priest? Because it's also off curve.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I guess one thing is he's already been through one Soul Priest. So that second Soul Priest is sort of the key for his Akanai Circle combo. He wants to make sure he has at least one piece of one of the parts of his I need to clear this board right now plans. But Death Lord seems like it could be a liability playing on an empty board. Maybe he's trying to bait out a Hex. But if he plays a big thing on turn 7 like Neptulon or Dr. Boom, and just clears the Death Lord, and so he has a big threat plus whatever comes out of the Death Lord, that's pretty risky.
All right, so we'll see what he's able to pull out of this Death Lord. Zombie Chow. Not the greatest.
Yeah, but it's also not the worst, because it's one extra target that Sylvanas can steal. That's
true.
Really not that big of a deal. Shamans can make, priests can make more use of Zombie Chows than most
I was
classes.
just going to say, with that Akanai in hand, however, I wouldn't feel very bad about stealing a Zombie Chow.
Yeah. And Sylvanas is still really problematic. Shamans usually have the best ways to deal with it because they have Hex, Earthshock, they can flood the board with totems or spiders.
What's she going to get? Oh! Rough.
Yeah.
Best possible outcome for Tom there.
And this is one of those surprising scenarios where the priest is behind.
Yeah, the priest has just not a very good hand. His best bet here, he can't do any shenanigans with his Pyromancer.
Yeah.
I mean, he can... Slowing him down with the Sludge Belcher isn't going to slow him down for long.
Nope.
Not at all. Doesn't actually trade with anything other than the Chows, which he probably would only use to kill the baby Sludge anyway.
Yeah, but on the other hand,
it does buy him some time.
He draws a Circle of Healing. Yeah. All of a sudden, Shaman's board is gone. Also heals him for 10. So that could be pretty disastrous. Some players have been cutting one Circle of Healing from their decks, which I thought was really interesting. It can be a dead card sometimes. But the amount of power plays you can make with either Arcanized Circle or like turn 1 Northshire Cleric, turn 2 coin out Injured Blade Master, Circle of Healing.
Yeah. Well, this one is just about over here. He can pray for a Thought Steal miracle.
Yeah, he's got to Wild Pyro 2 just to get a little bit of extra clear.
Yep.
Let's see if he gets a spell. Oh!
Oh! That helps.
That's a full board clear. He can Hex and then Rockbiter into the Zombie Chow. Oh, no.
Not quite.
Not quite. Actually, no, he's 1 mana short because he wouldn't be able to heal his Pyromancer up.
Yep. So let's see. If he were to Rockbiter the Zombie Chow, that would bring him to 23 health. And then on the board, you've got, is that 16 damage facing? Plus you've got Alakir in hand, which would be another 6, 22.
Yeah. I think he needs to
You gotta hex here.
Yeah. Because he knows that those Zombie Chows aren't really going to get silenced. He's not going to be able to turn those into damage. So he can sort of just like put those in the bank and say, okay, that'll be a 10-point heal. Let's take as much damage as I possibly can off the board right now.
Yeah.
But that's... Oh, it's just a little bit short. He has 12 damage. He has a total of 18 damage right now with the Alakir. Not quite.
Yep, just going to set it up. Continue to just dominate the board right now and kind of dare the Priest to have the Akanai Circle combo.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't get.
That's
so that should be about GG right here.
Effectively useless card. Now, how much could he possibly heal this turn? If he Rockbiters the first Zombie Chow and then Akanai and heals the second one, he'll still be alive.
Depending on the top deck from the Shaman, yeah, if he gets like a second Rockbiter with Alakir,
Flametongue Totem.
obviously.
Yeah, this is the best option for him to stay alive, but it's looking pretty grim because now he's lost that piece.
Yep.
Even if the Shaman isn't able to clear, and he actually goes for the Azure Drake, which I think is a smart play. Because now he has to trade everything into the Akanai in order to kill it off.
Right.
Or, you know.
Or you can just hex it. No problem.
And with that, he doesn't heal up enough for the second Zombie Chow. Yeah.
There it is. All right. So Tom takes what you call the 80-20 match in favor of the Shaman to advance to the winner bracket.
Yeah.
In Group A.
And pretty impressive stuff. And I mean, that's what I was talking about. It's the variance of Shaman. That first game, the Shaman didn't look like he had a chance. In that game, the Priest looked like he had a chance all the way up until he died.
Right.
And so that's just the difference between it. But, I mean, Tom played that exceptionally well. You can tell he has a lot of experience with Shaman. Some of the tough choices that you have to make, like Earth-Shocking the Northshire Cleric on turn 1 to deny the draw. I mean, that Circle of Healing could have been the next card. So if he had gotten one draw to that Northshire Cleric, that game could have been over. And it would have gone to a Game 5. But very impressive performance by Tom. And he's going to move on to that winner's match of the Group A.
Well, definitely an impressive performance. The BlizzCon player from 2014, not disappointing, showing Luffy the ropes a little bit about high-level, pro-level Hearthstone. He says, welcome to the big leagues, son. And he will be playing up next the winner of Kalento versus Lemurian.
Yeah.
So, given obviously Kalento being one of the best players in the world, and Lemurian someone that we're a little bit unfamiliar with, how do you think that match is going to shape up?
Kalento would be the obvious favorite, of course, but sometimes that can play against you. We saw a lot of the Open Challenger Cup winners last season win because the invited players, the tournament proven players, just didn't know anything about them. And they don't know about their playstyle, they don't know about their deck choices. Kalento, all of his stuff is like public. You can look on and see what Kalento played yesterday. So it might give Lemurian an advantage. We'll have to see.
Well, we definitely want to give a big shout out to our sponsors. That's Plantronics and Gigabyte for making all of this possible. Please follow those URLs down below and support the Hearthstone Legendary Series by supporting our sponsors so that we can continue to provide this awesome Hearthstone content for you. And of course, keep those tweets coming. That's using the hashtag HLS so that you can join in on the conversation with us. We'll be shooting some tweets your way as well, the two of us. And don't go anywhere because up next we will have Kalento versus Lemurian.